The pasuk then says, "V'lechem v'koli v'karmel lo yisoichelu ad etzem hayom hazeh ad aviachem es karban alekechem chukas elam d'reisechem b'chol moishveiseichem." Which the art scroll teaches, "You shall not eat bread or roasted kernels or plump kernels until this very day, until you bring the offering of alekechem. It is an eternal decree for your generations in all of your dwelling places." Meaning to say that until the carbon omer is brought, no new grains may be eaten. Now, what's considered a new grain? A new grain is something that did not take root before the carbon omer is brought. The rule is that if something took root before the carbon omer was brought, machlekes and poskim was 3 days before, 2 weeks before, but if it took root before the carbon ha'omer was brought, then that carbon ha'omer, which was brought on the second day of Pesach, is matir the new grain, that grain that took root to be eaten. If, however, it did not take root yet until by the time the omer was brought, so then that grain, which only took root after the carbon omer was brought, may not be eaten until the following year's carbon omer is brought. So any grain that took root before the omer is considered yashon. Once the omer is brought, it's mutter. Any grain that took root after the carbon omer was brought is considered chodosh and may not be eaten until the next carbon omer, at which point its status will turn into yashon. This halacha is negea the chameshes mini dagan. Wheat, barley, oat, spelt, and rye. Now, the Sefer Chinuch says that in Mishrashay HaMitzvah that the reason why we have to wait until the omer is brought is, it says it's similar to the idea of that you're not able to be also to be nena me'olam hazeh b'loy bracha. This Indian is a new grain. You have to wait until the omer is brought. Now, so that was all bisman that the Beis Hamikdash was kayim, and we brought a carbon omer. What about afterwards? So now the halacha is that you have to wait until that day finishes, meaning that the carbon omer was always brought on the second day of Pesach, the 16th of Nisan. So in Eretz Yisrael, you have to wait until the 17th of Nisan, and then the Chodosh becomes Yashan, gets Nitar, and in Chutz La'aretz you have to wait until the 18th of Nisan, and that's what this Shulchan Aruch is saying. Also, the Chodosh af bizman hazeh, even bizman hazeh when there's no omer. He finishes off. He says, "Bein kali, bein lechem and kali, bein karmel ad tchilas leil yudches b'nisan, u'v'eretz Yisrael ad tchilas leil yudzayim b'nisan." And he also passes this in Yeridea. Now, for us here right now in South Florida, in Stama, this whole entire Nidin is not going to be negay until next winter, because after Pesach everything's chadash. It becomes Yashan. And right now, the stores are already Pesach, so you can't buy anything anyways. So, but for the rest of the world, this should be Negea, a pasuk in the Torah. You're not allowed to eat Chodosh. Now, is this Isser Chodosh one of the mitzvahs Hatzuliyas Ba'aretz? Is it exclusive to Eretz Yisrael? Or is it Negea also in Chutz La'aretz? It certainly is Negea in Eretz Yisrael, and that's why no reputable hechsher in Eretz Yisrael would be on something that is not Yashan. What about in Chutz La'aretz? So there's a Mishnah in Kedushin, Dafam Vavam Beis, where there's a machlekes. The Tanakama says that Chodosh is only Negea, it's one of the mitzvahs, it's going to be a mitzvah Hatzuliyas Ba'aretz, it's only going to be Negea in Eretz Yisrael. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer says that no, it's Chodosh also applies to Chutz La'aretz. Now, how do we pass? Shulchan Aruch in Yeridea, Simon Reish Tzadi Gimel says, this is Sif Beis, says Isser Chodosh Noyeg Bein Ba'aretz Bein B'chutz La'aretz Bein B'shal Yisrael Bein B'shal Ovek Chavim. That Isser Chodosh is Negea, say in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz for a Yid, for if it belonged to a Yid, if it belonged to a Goy, makes no difference. So the Shulchan Aruch is saying like Rebbe Eliezer, this psak of the Isser Chodesh Noeg Bein Ba'aretz Bein B'chutz La'aretz is clear in the Rif, the Rambam, the Rosh, the Tur, Shulchan Aruch, and many others as well. The Shulchan Aruch for Yidais with Bein B'shal Yisrael, Bein B'shal Ovek Chavim, that is mefurish in a Tosfos in Kedushin, where over there the Tosfos brings down a Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says that why did the Mishnah not talk about Chala? And the Yerushalmi says that the Mishnah was only talking. The Mishnah over there in Kedushin was only talking about things that are negea by a guy. Chala, which would not be negea by a guy, is not included. So Zok Tosfos, so it says, it seems to say in this Yerushalmi that Chodosh, which is mentioned in the Mishnah, would be negea by a guy, and that's why it is in the Mishnah. So the question that we'll ask here, but all the Svarim over all the generations have dealt with is that seemingly the Minhag HaOlam is to be Mekel. And so the question is, why? So I'd like to put forth 5 different shittas that there are to be Mekel. Try to do it again. First one is in the Ramah. The Ramah, he's doing this based on a Tshuvas Harash, which the Torah brings down, which is that there's the inyan of a svek seika. We don't know exactly where the wheat is coming from, where the grain is coming from. So it could be that the grain is coming from last year. First of all. So if it's coming from last year, certainly Yashon. And even if it's coming from this year, Zak the Rosh, could be that this grain was nishrash before the Eimer was brought, or now it is before the 17th, 18th of Nisan. So Mustam is asking Reb Kiyager's kasha, which is that what's the svek sveika? L'chayra, there's only one the definitive time, which is when the Eimer is brought. Anything that was Nishrash before then will be Yashon. Anything that's Nishrash after then will be Chodesh. L'chayr does not make any. Where's the svek sveika of that? If it was Negea in the previous, that could be in the previous year, and even this year, maybe it was before the Karban Eimer. So the Aruch HaShulchan gives a teretz. The Aruch HaShulchan says is that there's an afkamina, which is that the grain of that grew this year is able to be brought for the Karban Eimer, whereas grain from the previous year is not allowed to be used to be brought for the Karban Eimer. So Zakter, being that there's an afkamina, he was married in a different place, that's enough to create that it's 2 separate sveikas, and Mela, that's the svek sveika. You might see that this might be totally l'shitase. So many of the poskim, Shabura, Moshe, v'chulu, they all say this is only though if you have a real svek sveika, meaning if you're able to be mevarer things, so then you will not be able to use this svek sveika. And from my understanding, from what I've seen, nowadays in America, things are very, very easily able to be tracked. The information is there, and you have to know if your Svek Sveko would still be Kain. No specific order, because these five. The next one we'll bring is the Magen Avram. Magen Avram, this is the Magen Avram in Hilchos Pesach. He says that in that Chuvas Harash, the Chuvas Harash, he quotes Rabbeinu Baruch. Rabbeinu Baruch wants to suggest that Chodosh is only Midirabban in Chutz La'aretz. It's not Midiraisa. Because he says, and he says that the whole Gzer D'Rabbanan would have only, they were only mamash machmir on the aratzis that were right around Eretz Yisrael. Anything further away, if you have a suffix, so then you'll be able to go suffix D'Rabbanan L'Kula. The Aruch HaShulchan, he brings down that he brings down our Zerua like that. Also that says that it's a suffix that it's D'Rabbanan. Aruch HaShulchan wants to say that this whole din D'Rabbanan was only on places where it was possibly negea to bring the carbon ha'imr from. So Memela, that's why that would not. Anything beyond that is fine. I was wondering, maybe could be that the Aruch HaShulchan L'Shitasa, this is L'Shitasa, that he would say, not like a B'Keveger, he would say that it would happen afkamino to make a Sfek the fact that Tfuah that was planted this year could be brought for carbon Aimer, because he's learning that the whole Gzeir in the first place had to do with things pertaining to the carbon Aimer. So, on the Magen Avram himself ends off that Bal Nefesh Yachmir Kechol She'efsher, and this too, you look in the Pesachim, there is a lot that the Pesachim argue on this. So it's that the Taz basically says it's shver, but there was a Tanakama that argued on Rabbi Eliezer. So even though Rishonim are all passing like Rabbi Eliezer, but he says it's a shas atchak, because if we're not able to eat from the chodesh, so then we're not going to have what to eat. So Memela, so he says that he builds it out that in this for a shas atchak, so you're able to be soymech on the shitas Tanakama, and you could go with the Tanakama that says that chodesh and was not, chodesh was only on Eretz Yisrael. It's not midaraisa on Chutz La'aretz, and Memela would be able to be matter. The Shach goes very stark.
It's like the Ramah in Yoreh De'ah, that it's mutar shiyu shagin of ali mazidin, because they don't have anything they won't have what to eat.
Right. No, so the Aruch HaShulchan also speaks out. The Aruch HaShulchan speaks. He says that the Ramah was coming out to Sex Feka and was not allowing for other cheshbonos. That was because he lived in Poland and those places where they had things that were Yoshon. But he says, where I live in Russia, if we didn't eat Yoshon for 8 months a year, we wouldn't have anything to eat. So 8 months a year, you can't live like that. So the Shach argues with Chol Tekef, and Stamza he argues on this whole entire the whole binyan of the Taz of doing things because of Shas Atchak to be Soymech. He holds that you can't do that. There's a Lechem Mishnah and a Pnei Yeshua, which is negea not to all things that are Chodesh, but it's only they're talking about beers, beers, specifically drinks that are derived from grain. They hold that because it's not, you don't have the mamashas, so that would be mutter. The Shach argues on that. There's a Bach, which the Bach is perhaps the only one who's really very not apologetic about his shita. He comes in. He says that he saw all the gedolim were eating chadash. There was no nothing about it. So he looked into it, and he comes out that the Issa D'Oraisa, even we pass like Rabbi Lazar, but that's only for chadash that's owned by a yid. Chadash that's owned by a goy says that would not have the Issa D'Oraisa, and he goes so far as to say along shtickle he brings rayas, and he says v'lechein ein l'shum gadol lahiris hara le'iser hepech haminig shenogu al pi gedoli yisrael leheter umisha roitz lahachmer la'atzmei. Somebody wants to do that midas chasidusu v'leyer la'achirim. Don't tell anybody else because le'leis l'nsuye. And he says dafka b'misha horgel b'shar prishes some forcem lechasid rashai linig leser zeh. I'm stark. So Zaydim the Taz argues on his shitas, and the Goyin who comes and really argues on all the different shitas, he says that mitzad the Bach, he says kvar hikuk al kod kodai kol ha'achreinim ushkaga yatsa mitachas yadai v'teva havalei kind of shtika is strong l'shenis the other way. So in 40 seconds, I'm not coming to say anything to myself, but first of all, after all these five, the Steichemet brings down a Sefer Tshuis Chen, the Piskei Tshuva Shalzen Tzu, who basically says that there's a tzir of kol time elu, but Klal Yisrael was already was naig like this. And when there's a minig, so you follow the minig. It says maybe the Rif Ramam Rosh, maybe the minig wasn't kavua b'yameim yet, but there's a minig, and you have to follow the minig. But even he ends off Yored V'Hashem Yachash La'atzmei Lahachmir K'Rif Ramam B'Rosh B'Yateisus. Mishnah Brura over there in Tafei Tes says he brings down the different aterim. He says v'inei that we can't be meicha biyara mikilim. We call makam kol bal nefesh lo yismech al aterim halalu v'yachmir la'atzmei kechol masha efshaloi ki laharbe gedolei rishayim hu is the rest of b'chol gavni. As much as you can. The Biur Halacha over there, he says that he sees there are people who are machmirim and all different kinds of things, and linyan zeh they don't do it. He says he thinks that pshat is because people think that it's all or nothing with this. So if it's all or nothing, so it's a very shver zach to do. He says, no, whatever the person can do, they should do. They're not going to be machmer all the way. It's not a reason to be makel all the way. So it's not like hashkafically. It's a very important musig also that person, whatever they're able to do, they should do, and I think we can't end off a shir without mentioning Chassam Sofer in his whole entire battle against the reform. His whole battle cry was based on Mishnah and Arlo, which is the reason whether you're Yoshen and Paskin like Rabbi Lezer, which there's a Stam Mishnah in the end of Arlo that says Chodosh Asim and Atayr B'chol Makom. So he said any chadoshes that people are going to be making, they should not make. You see the chashivas of a minig. There's a lot to say, and
for asking you.
no.
Thank you. Just such a geschmack, interesting rum. I mean, any rum. So that there's that, and three, because you can't live. That was the mug in the front.